Doesn't mean an election's off the table for good. In fact, Boris Johnson, when he spoke after the decision that the MPs made that they wouldn't support an election, told the opposition and Jeremy Corbyn to go away and think about their decision, perhaps reconsider, which gives us some kind of hint that the Prime Minister might be planning to ask Parliament again to go for an election. And that wouldn't surprise me, because we know Boris Johnson desperately does want this election. And the reason he wants this election is he just doesn't have a majority in Parliament. That means he can't pass his Brexit deal, but it also means he can't pass any other legislation either. He started the week with a wafer-thin majority in Parliament of just one. He's had a couple of defections from his party. He's also sacked, so to speak, 21 of his own MPs. He really needs to go to an election now to get a majority, but also he would hope that that was a mandate. So he would hope he could win an election so he could essentially come back to Parliament and say, look, the people have spoken here. They want me in power. They like the direction I'm taking Brexit. Let me go to Brussels and negotiate. If I can't do a deal, then we're going to leave with no deal. So it'll be interesting to see over the next couple of days if Labor softens its position. And it just might soften its position because they have always said they want a general election. They just decided in the last couple of days they didn't want one until no deal Brexit was taken completely off the table. As you mentioned, there's a fair bit of legislation before Parliament at the moment that's being voted on tomorrow in the House of Lords, which possibly takes no deal off the table. So let's take stock for a couple of days, I think, here and see what does exactly play out. But be sure Boris Johnson's looking for a way to call an election. And I might add, if he can't find one way to call an election in a traditional sort of way, he may even, we're told, consider calling a vote of no confidence in himself, which would trigger an election. But that would be an extraordinary move.
Yeah, when Boris Johnson was talking about trying to hold this election, he was saying, you know, one of us or somebody needs to decide who is going to go to Brussels to sort out this mess. And increasingly a mess does seem like what this is. Let's talk about this bill to block a no-deal Brexit. What happens with that next?
OK, so if this passes, it's passed the House of Commons now. It needs to go to the House of Lords. If it passes, it forces Boris Johnson to go to the EU and ask for a Brexit deadline extension. At the moment, the Brexit deadline is October 31. Now, if we're getting close to that date and Boris Johnson hasn't been able to negotiate a new deal with the European Union, then this legislation makes him ask for an extension. Now, he hates this because he believes it undermines his negotiating strategy. At the moment, Boris Johnson is hanging the threat of a no-deal Brexit over the head of the EU, and he wants them to know that he's deadly serious, that he means that he will take this country out of the EU with no deal if they don't offer him a better Brexit deal than the one they offered Theresa May. He's hoping that at the last minute they will cave in and make some sort of concession and give him that better deal. But it's a high game of brinkmanship, and there is no indication at this point from the EU that they would be willing to give any concessions, which is why Parliament behind us here has decided they need to do something to block no deal, because they feel it would be catastrophic. There's already talks of food shortages, medicine shortages, damaging for the economy. But very interestingly, just a couple of hours ago, the Bank of England came out and said, we've changed our minds a little bit on how bad no-deal Brexit would be. They used to say it would be very bad. They're now saying, actually, we think this Boris Johnson government is preparing for a no-deal Brexit in a satisfactory enough way that it wouldn't be as catastrophic as we first thought. And I suspect that Boris Johnson will seize on that statement from the Bank of England, particularly if this does all end up in an election. It'll be one way he can sell to potential voters that even if he does take this country out with a no-deal Brexit, it won't be the end of the world.